I always start these interviews with just where people have lived, just some demographics. So tell me about where you were born, the family you were raised in, and the different places you've lived in your life. Just 2 or 3 minutes.
Quick summary.
Yeah, quick.
Okay. I was born October 9th, 1939 in Newark, New Jersey. That's where the hospital was, but we lived on Arlington Avenue in East Orange, New Jersey. And I was there till I was about 6, 7 years old. My father went through bankruptcy. He lost his tool and die shop during the Second World War. He was a major high-quality producer of aircraft parts for the Air Force. But anyway, got into some bad contracts after the war. So about 1948, I was the oldest of 6 children. The 5th and 6th were twin girls. And it turned out that winter they had pneumonia twice. After second time, the doctor said, you've got to take them down, get them down to Florida, warm climate, or else they'll die. So Pop loaded everything up with a car, with a trailer, with all the personal belongings, and we headed to Florida. And we got as far as New Smyrna Beach, Florida. And we lived there 1 year, and then we moved a little further south to Oak Hill. And while there, my father became a fisherman. I went to school. I loved to fish with him. So, and there I was in the 2nd and 3rd grade, and I basically went to class on a Friday, turned in my assignment that I got the previous Friday, picked up my new assignment, and then I was out on the boat with my father fishing. Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, fishing and shrimping. And that's what we did for a couple of years. My mother went to Miami Beach, Florida to become a waitress to try and make ends meet. She was living down there. Pop was there, and then there were times when Pop would go to Miami, Florida to visit Mom, and I was left with my 1 brother and 4 sisters to look after. And of course, at that time, I was only 8 or 9 years old. But that's what we did. We lived on a multi-acre tract of land with orange trees and mulberry trees, and we would catch shrimp in the Indian River, bring them home, put them in a large tub, boil them out in the front yard, and we would have shrimp and fruit. And we had beehives, we had honey. So we had a variety of things that we lived off of. From there, we moved to Miami, Florida, where my father got back in the tool and die business. And then he became a builder. And actually, when we were back in New Jersey, as a 6-year-old, I used to work in the machine shop. I used to operate a planer. I learned how to operate a lathe, a drill press, a punch press. In fact, I cut off the end of my finger one time with a punch press, and of course the blood was spurting out, and my mother said, to Dad, this is wrong, you should not do it. He says, dip it in kerosene, it'll be fine. My father was born in New Brunswick, Canada, Moncton, and French Canadian, and only had a 4th grade education, but he was smart as a whip and very, very creative. My mother had gone as far as, had graduated high school and had been in nursing. But anyway, down in Florida, we got into building. I used to go out and build with Pop. And so I learned how to put in foundations, lay concrete blocks, plaster. Back then we plastered. We didn't have wallboard, carpentry, plumbing, electrical, tile setting. At the age of 15, my father gave me a truck. I bought a whole new set of tools. I went out and bid my own jobs, hired a crew, and I would do renovations and building of homes at age 15, which frightened some of the people that I had contracts with because I was a minor. And therefore my contract, the adult was binding. My signature was not binding legally. And it would always frighten them when they would ask me. I was 6 foot, weighed 200 pounds, and they would ask me, how old are you? And I'd say 15. And then fright came over their eyes and face. And I said, well, you don't have anything to worry about. I was recommended to you by your neighbor down the road. I've got anywhere from $10,000 to $20,000 of material on your property. I did not ask you for a down payment. And part of the contract was that you wouldn't pay a dime until I'm finished. So, relax. And of course, I would do the work. And typically, I would go to school and then work in the afternoons and then on the weekends to make ends meet. And Pop was doing it. I was doing it. So between the two of us, we survived in the environment down there. Graduated from Miami Edison High School. And in fact, surprising, because I was working as much as I did, and playing too. I mean, I played Little League Baseball, Babe Ruth baseball, football, basketball, plus working. And one of the interesting things growing up, my senior year, my English teacher asked us to make a list of all the books that we have read, to which I wrote none. And she asked, how did you do all your book reports? I said, I read classic comics. And then I took the story and then I made it up. I embellished it. I created. And that's how I did it. She says, you will go to the library and you will read one book before you graduate, which I did. But then I was accepted at MIT. Unfortunately, my English was weak. They said I would have to go to summer school and take one 4-hour credit course before getting, or Georgia Tech was no problem. And then University of Florida, when it was all said and done, I couldn't get scholarships. And so I went to University of Florida to become a mechanical engineer. I had to I was choosing between being an engineer or a lawyer. And because I was on the debate society and I loved to debate. And what I always liked is the ability to prepare for pro and con on whatever the issue was and then debate it. And because that's what we were required to do prior to a competition. And so I enjoyed that. But anyway, I went to University of Florida. I had just enough money to get through my freshman year. I signed up for the co-op program with Florida Power and Light. And by being co-op, after your freshman year, you work one semester, go to school one semester. So it makes it a 5-year program. And I did that with Florida Power and Light. That summer, when I showed up at the plant, they were having a wildcat strike. And there was a picket line and all that. And I came up to the plant, and they stopped me, and I said, hey, I'm reporting to work. I don't know what your problem is. Meanwhile, the plant manager was hanging in effigy there at the gate. It was pretty tough group. But I was going into the power plant, and I said, fellas, I don't know what your beef is, but I'm going to work. So I became a scab. I went through the line, got in there. Mr. Fred Davis, who was the plant manager, and I said, what's going on? He said, He says, they do this every couple of years, but they'll come back. Don't worry about it. So I went to work. Anyway, so then they came in, and then he assigned me in the maintenance shop. And, of course, the maintenance was the hotbed. And so I got to talk, and I just listened, and they had some legitimate beefs. But not severe. They sort of got blown out of proportion. But I finished my summer there. Then I had enough money to go back to school for the fall semester. Then I was broke again. And then I came back and worked a semester. Now, while I worked with Florida Power and Light Monday through Friday, 40-hour job, on the weekends I did some construction job. On the evenings, I sold real estate on the telephone, telephoning, calling New York, New Jersey folks to come out and buy land. Now, this is back in 1957 or 58, 59, and people would send money and buy land at Cape Coral, which is on the west coast of Florida, a large development, which today I think is a city of 50,000 people. So it certainly became a reality, and those people did quite well. But they bought it, and of course, a couple of years prior to that, it was swampland, but it was dried out and filled up. So basically, I would have 3 jobs. Florida Power and Light, sold real estate at night, and on the weekends, I did construction work. And again, I made enough money so I could go back to school, and I did that. Of interest, in my freshman year, my first semester, you had to take a political science course, and my professor was Professor Price, a World War II vet, lost one leg, lovely gentleman, and I was all business. I was going to get an education. I was going to be the first one in the family to go to college and so on. So it was very important to me to succeed, to make it. And the last class before the Christmas holiday, he excused everybody halfway through. I'm letting you, my present to you is, class is over. Everyone's excused except for Mr. Boudreau. I'd like to see you after class. I figured something was going on. We talked a little bit about what we're going to do over the holidays, and he said, well, Mr. Boudreau, the reason I kept you over here is there's a young lady, her name is Barbara Kennedy, and she sits a couple of seats in front of you in the same row. When you return in January, I would recommend you get to know her. To which I went up and introduced myself, and we had a date, and she's my wife, and next January of 50 years we will have been married. So that's how it started. But anyway, I finished, we got married in Bobby's senior year. I still had a year and a half to go because it was a 5-year program. She was in a 4-year studying business education. We got married. Her aunt and uncle, Bobby's parents, separated when she was like 4 years old. Unfortunately, father was an alcoholic and couldn't get above it. And so the mother raised, but every summer she sent Bobby to her aunt and uncle in New Jersey. They lived in St. Petersburg, Florida at the time. And she would spend the summers with Uncle George and Aunt Helen. As it turned out, we were going to get married. They said, no, if you wait until you graduate, you will have we'll give you a honeymoon in Barbados for the 2 of you. All expense paid, everything. They go there, vacations, they love it. But we said, no, it's going to be a neat thing to both be going to classes. We'll have classes on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. We'll have Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, and Sunday to ourselves, doing our assignments. But so we got married. Well, we didn't get our honeymoon in Barbados. We honeymooned in Daytona Beach, Florida. So our first son, Rhett, was born while we were at the University of Florida. I had no insurance. I paid for everything, cash. And and Bobby taught for 1 semester at Keystone High School, business education. And when we got married, I bought a 28-foot trailer. And that 28-foot trailer was an Airstream built after the Second World War, 1947, 48. All aluminum, mahogany inside. It was it's like an Airstream type, but it was called a Spartan. And now back in those days, you didn't have bathrooms in trailers. You pulled up and there was a rear door, and it opened into a little room that was a bathroom at trailer parks. That's the way it was done. But anyway, where we were going, you had to have a bathroom and a toilet and so on. But I didn't have a lot of room in 28 feet. So I took the rear bedroom and I made it into a bathroom. And so what it was is you could sit on the toilet and the sink, and the shower was right overhead. It was all in one. So you could shit, shower, and shave at the same time. But anyway, Bobby got pregnant. We had our first son. And of course, that back room that used to be the bedroom became the nursery with the bathroom in it. And of course, we lived slept on a fold-out couch up in the living room. But I interviewed for 10 jobs while Bobby was in her 7th or 8th month. I decided to go with companies that were defined by the Fortune magazine as the best managed in the United States or in the world. But it turned out to be companies like General Electric, Exxon, Procter & Gamble, General Motors at the time, Sears and Roebuck, and so on, Union Carbide, DuPont. So I interviewed 10 companies, and again, I had to get companies spread over the last 3 or 4 years. So I came up with, I wasn't interested in Sears and Roebuck, even though they were touted as a well-run company. So I interviewed 10 companies. Fortunately, I got 10 job offers. The date of decision, Bobby and I talked. I said, well, I really like Procter & Gamble. And she said, why? And I told her, but primarily the plant visit, non-union plant, and again, part of my background with Florida Power and Light, non-union plant. It was built back in 1888. You could eat off the floors. It was so clean. It was a shortening in oils, industrial food plant. And Mr. Chevron, who was the plant manager, in all of his years since 1948, he never had a shipment that was off quality. He had the smallest plant with the lowest cost, the best quality, and the best safety record in Procter & Gamble. So I was going to learn a lot from him in terms of what you do and how you do it. And to which Bobby said, and where were they going to send you, that plant? That was in Macon, Georgia. And I said, yeah. And she said, oh, the armpit of the world. It was her thought. Well, we got there, and we had a good time. We lived in a duplex, and then after 1 year, we started looking around, like one of these days we'll move into a house, and there was this lovely ranch, 3,000 plus square feet on 4 acres. Neighbors had horses, and it was in a rolling hills with a valley and a stream. Anyway, the gentleman who owned it was going away for 6 years or longer. Anyway, so they were going to sell it. On the road, on this little cul-de-sac type street, was all of his brothers and sisters and his parents. So they were very interested in terms of who was going to live there. And they interviewed. And of course, it was out of our price range. I couldn't afford it. So, but we showed up, we went through, and they said, what are you looking for? And we told them, I said, we're just looking because one of these days we're going to get a house. We just wanted to see what it costs. Well, how much can you afford? After they got to know us, I said, we now pay, I don't know, it was $300 a month. I said, probably the most I could ever pay and afford right now is $400 a month, because while we were in Macon, our second child was born after we were there a year, and then Bobby was pregnant with our daughter Lee. So we had 2 children who were born in Macon, Georgia, and the first one was born in Gainesville, Florida. Anyway, we told them what we could afford, and that's certainly out of your range. So we left. Anyway, a week later, we got a phone call saying we'd like for you to rent our house with the option to buy it, that all the money you put down for rent, you could use towards purchasing the house. So we went in and rented, and we lived in it for about a year. And of course, I got this call to my boss's office saying, Lou, it'll be 2 years here in a couple of months, and we need to send you to Cincinnati, Ohio. We have a plant up there, our largest shortening oil plant, and it's the largest in the system. It has the highest cost, the worst quality and safety, and so we're bringing in a group of managers. And I came out of Macon, another gentleman came out of Dallas, another one came out of Staten Island, Port Ivory, New York. We brought in and we were given each different departments to try and bring this together. While there, well, anyway, so I came back home to tell Bobby that they want to transfer us, and in about 2 to 3 months we will need to go to Cincinnati. And she says to me, Lou, is there another company here in Macon that you would like to work for? I said, I thought this was the armpit of the world. Anyway, she says, no, I love being a Southern woman, being pampered. But anyway, so we went to, now it turned out Lee was born, and we were flying out early August. So Lee was only like 4 or 5 weeks old. And I know we were going to drive, and Mr. Chevron said, no, you're going to fly. And we will ship all your personal belongings, and your car will be shipped. And you will fly first class. And he'd already made all these arrangements. And Mr. C never had any children, but he was that sort of individual. In fact, one of the things that I learned in Macon, when we showed up, and of course we moved into the duplex. In fact, when we put the 2 months rent down for the duplex, and we left the University of Florida, we had $35 in our pocket. That was it. But we were free and clear, no debt. And we showed up in the duplex that first night, and we put Rhett, our baby, in the tub to sleep, and Bobby and I slept on the floor. Our next door neighbor found out about it the next morning, and next thing I know, they're knocking on the door, and they have a spare bedroom with furniture, and they were right there to saying, we want you to use this until you settle in. But we went to a TV store in downtown Macon, and we went and we're just looking, and we're getting prices of furniture and to do our budgeting, and we saw that one Zenith TV, and we liked that one. And the gentleman walked up to me and said, do you like that TV? I said, yeah. Where do you live? I said, he says, well, why don't you take it and see how the reception is up there on Boulevard Avenue, which is where we lived, up on the hill. I said, no, I can't afford it. It'll probably be 2 or 3 months before I'll come back. I mean, we got other things we'll have to buy, but the TV will have to wait. But I know what it'll cost, and so on. He called one of his hired hands there, and he says, take this TV and put it in his car. Now, I came from Miami, Florida, where you don't do that. He didn't even know who I was. He knew I worked for Procter & Gamble. He knew I lived on Boulevard. And here's the TV, and put it in the car. Use it, and then when you're ready, come back and pay for it. So I looked at Bobby, and I said, well, let's try it. So TV, and of course, as we were driving away, I said, look back and see if he's getting our license number or something. But anyway, what I found out is many years ago, back in like 1950, or after Mr. Chevron had been there 2 or 3 years in Macon, he had a manager who went out and had a couple of nice suits made by a local tailor, and then he resigned from Procter & Gamble and left town with debts, flew the coop. And Mr. Chevron was at a Chamber of Commerce meeting, and this particular tailor walked up to him and says, I don't know what type of people you're hiring there, but there are a bunch of crooks. Mr. Chevron said, what do you mean? This gentleman, I made 2 suits, and he's left town. I have no phone number, address, or anything. And Mr. Chevron said, and what was the price of those 2 suits? And total of $200. Back then, a lot of money. Mr. Chevron reached into his pocket and he peeled off $200 and he says, does that take care of it? And yep. He says, all Procter & Gamble employees their debts will be paid. And so that spread throughout town. And so any Procter & Gamble employee, was golden in terms of getting credit or being treated. So anyway, we went to, so after 2 years in Macon, Georgia, I went to Cincinnati, Ohio, saw this plant. It was built on an old cinder pit where we had the large coal-fired boiler. The cinders coming out of the boiler were dumped into this mill creek and into the area and created a couple of acres, and then they built a plant on it. Unfortunately, the cinders would collapse and the building would sink, and then so it had sloping floors, it had broken windows. In fact, after my 3 months of training before taking over the hardening department, which is where you add hydrogen to fats and oils to increase their shelf life and so on, I was put through a 2-hour quiz by the plant manager and 6 of the group managers, and they quiz you for 2 hours. And then Mr. Goodrich said, Lou, you are qualified to take over Monday. The hardening department is yours. And he was sitting at the end of the table, and I was at the other end, and everybody, applauded, And Mr. Goodrich said to me, Lou, what do you think of my plant? And I said, Mr. Goodrich, had I come to this plant on my plant visit while I was in college, I never would have joined Procter & Gamble. You could have heard a pin drop. And he said, what do you mean? I said, sir, this plant and your group managers, and you all have been a team here for about 6 to 8 years. So you all know each other quite well. And I know we're being brought in here to try and help turn it around. But you have the largest plant, and rather than having the lowest unit cost, you have the highest. You have safety. You have a local union that there's a lot of animosity between the management and the people. And that plant, the hardening plant, which was 4 stories high and with hydrogen and broken windows in the wintertime and sloping floors that if there's any grease on them, you're going to fall on your butt. I said, I'm going to take about 2 months to put together a master plan to fix it. And then I'm going to come back to you and ask you to go get the money. And then we'll work on it. A typical assignment in P&G for new managers, was typically 2 years. This was such a big job. I said I'll stay here 3 years to finish it, and which we did. We went in and replaced concrete floors. We replaced windows, and he did. To his credit, he got the money, but he did one more thing. He called me one day and said, Lou, just want to let you know I'm going to the Macon plant. I want to see what you were talking about. And to his credit, he jumped on a plane, flew to Macon. Mr. Chevron greeted him. And he came back. He says, I understand why you said what you said. Now, while I was there, there was a manager who had, one of the team managers had done something that was wrong. And so the union had filed a grievance. I basically took the side of the operator. Said the manager was wrong. Manager, you need to go apologize to the guy and we'll fix it and get it right and so on. I was called in and Ivordale Complex was the largest complex in Procter & Gamble worldwide. It had 5 different plants. And so there was a division manager there, and then a head of human resources. He called me into his office, and he said, "Lou, you don't understand. You don't side with them. You always take the manager's position." And to which I said, "No, no. What you do is you side with what's right." And the manager was wrong. He's admitted he understands he was wrong. And he told me why he did what he did. And as far as I'm concerned, we're going to apologize to him and try and deal with this straight up. I got chastised, but I said, "No, folks, you don't understand." So anyway, but I was there 3 years. Then I was moved from a processing department, and they put me in an industrial engineering role to learn cost management, budgeting, and things of that nature, which I did. From there, I got tapped to be on the Pringles design team. We were starting this big venture, which was going to be for the company one of the largest investments, approaching $500 million back in 1970 dollars. That's a lot of money. And here I was only 5 years with the company, going on 6 years, and I was being tapped as the guy representing manufacturing on the team with engineering and product development and so on to design, oversee the construction, sign off on every blueprint, lay out how the plant was going to be built and all the facilities and so on, which was fine. And I think primarily because of my background as a high school kid doing construction and working at Florida Power and Light, that all gave me a background. It was interesting, as we were designing the plant, the architect came to me one day, and this plant was going to have over 1,000 technicians. And this is one of my joys in my life and career. We started the journey with the strategy that we were not going to be a unionized operation. Procter & Gamble was moving towards having local unions to avoid a national union. I said, no, why not non-union? And I had a plant manager, Bob Marsden, who felt the same way. And he also had excellent standards. In fact, he came to us from the Iowa City plant, which was toilet goods, which was making Crest toothpaste, those type of items. So he had good high standards of sanitation and plant construction and cleanliness and so on, as I did. And so it was a match. So anyway, the architect came to me and says, "Where do you want me to put the time clock?" I said, "There will be no time clock in this plant." And he said, "What do you mean? How are you going to know when they come to work and when they leave and take break in the morning and lunch and a break in the afternoon?" I said, "If I can't trust them to take care of that detail, why would I put them out on a line, hire them, train them, put them on a line that's worth millions of dollars and dealing with millions of dollars of product every shift? No, we're going to operate on a trust concept." And so every person we hired, when they came into the plant, I was the first person they met in the morning for a 2-hour orientation. And I took them through the whole concept that you'll notice that when you came through the front door, there was no lock on it. You will see as you go through the plant, there's no time clock. You will see the tool boxes and the tool carts that you have do not have locks on them. The only place that there are any locks in this building, in this plant site, and this site covered 115 acres. The plant facility itself for Pringles covered about 20 acres. Is the only lock will be your lock in the locker room. And again, we're going to talk about the trust concept. Now, out of every 100 of you, 99 of you will love the freedom and responsibility you have, and you will handle it well. There's 1% that will try and work the system. I don't know who you will be, but we'll find you out. But what I'd like is your fellow technicians, because they're going to know it before I will. Any of the managers will know it. I want them to take you into a conference room and whoever you are, and try and convince you that that's not the way to live your life, and give you the choice of changing. If not, I expect them to drop some hints, and then we'll be on the lookout, and then it's just a matter of time when we will ask you to leave the company and go find another job more to your liking. So we did that, and I remember the Teamsters tried to organize the plant, 1,000 employees. They showed up one afternoon at the parking lot, and they were handing out flyers, and a couple of technicians took the flyers, read it, drove back into the parking lot, came into my office and said, "Do you want us to take them out?" I said, "No, they have every right to do that. You have every right to read it. And this meeting they're going to hold at the Holiday Inn. You have every right to go and listen. But as you know, well, you're one of the highest paid. You have a nice benefits package. You have a profit sharing program. You got freedom with your responsibility, which you take. That's the world we're creating, not a world where a union is like it's like a mother-in-law. In other words, I've got to talk to my mother-in-law before I can talk to my wife, and we don't operate that way. And you all have now had over a year of what we're trying to build, and we are building. And anyway, out of over 1,000 technicians at the meeting at the Holiday Inn, and of course HR was at the Holiday Inn looking, we had only one technician show up. One. And it turns out that one technician was coming out of the utility area, and our utility manager, who was a plant engineer, he was from the old school. He was a Navy guy, submarine commander, and he didn't quite get what we were about, the spirit. And so these people in the utility could see what was going on in the operation and in the warehousing, and they liked it and they wanted it, but they weren't getting it. Anyway, turned out I replaced him. I took on his role also, and then I worked with those people. That guy who, his name was Ted Dickerson, and Ted actually got promoted to management. He was a good guy, very bright, very capable, became a manager.
Just in the interest of time,
let's
move to just hit the big, from there, the locations you live.
Okay.
And then we'll get into the topic.
Okay. Well, I'm sorry. The reason I sort of drafted it is to give you some of the things, and the Jackson was an experience where, for me, in terms of trust and all that. After Jackson, the company brought me into Cincinnati in a corporate role, and special study to decide whether or not we were going to stay in business in Pringles or not. And I had a Frank Acamo, who was a finance guy. We had 2 months to put together a proposal for the board of directors to either get out of the business or stay in it. Anyway, my proposal was to stay in it. I then became the food manufacturing office manager, responsible for 12 plants throughout the United States, overseeing their operation and supplies and distribution of product and so on. I did that until I was tapped to go into China to deal with setting up a logistical distribution, warehousing, shipping, order shipping billing system throughout China. And that's a whole nother story. But when I showed up there, we had been there 5 years. After 5 years, here we had this plant that was capable of producing 75 million stat cases. We were only selling 5 because we couldn't distribute it throughout China. My job was to find a way. I did. It took me 4 months. And within 14 months, we were shipping 50 million stat. And basically, I hired the military. And I did a list of 10 things, which I had presented. And that's a whole nother story unto itself. But we made it happen.
I got to make your tea time, otherwise I would get all of it in detail.
No, that's okay. But anyway, so that was it. And then after 3 years there, I was age 56, and research showed that white males who were in stressful jobs, and China was a stressful job, but a good job, they die early. So for every year they can retire earlier than 65, they can add the equivalent number of years to their life expectancy. Wives outlive their husbands on average 9 years. So if you want to have a double funeral, the man ought to retire at age 56, and they'll live about the same length of time, which is into the early 80s. So, and that,
So you retired.
retired, went back to Indiana on the lake there, and I was there for, well, we bought in 90, and we lived there. And of course, 93 through 96, we were in China, came back, and renovated, expanded the house, and remodeling. I remodeled one of the house for my son in Virginia, and then I remodeled my daughter's house in Cincinnati. So I was doing some remodeling. I was doing some consulting with companies like SABIC in Saudi Arabia, Basic Industries. I did some work for K-Swiss. I did some work for Goodyear. I wasn't seeking it; they seeked me, and that was fine. And it was fun. It sort of felt like the professor because I could share some wisdom and some years of experience and think outside the box. We lived there at Hidden Valley Lake in Indiana, and we decided that, okay, the kids aren't coming here anymore because kids are in junior high, they got their sports, their lives, and we decided we got one son on the West Coast, our daughter's in Cincinnati in the Midwest, and our other son's on the East Coast. But of the three areas, Oregon was the lovely spot. So we decided to move there. And those were our two oldest grandsons who were going into junior high. So that meant we could participate. And both parents worked, so many times we were taking them to their sporting events, be it soccer, be it basketball, be it baseball games, golf matches throughout the state of Oregon. We would take the kids while mom and dad were working. So we were providing grandparent support to the family. Now they're in college, and so now we're faced with, here we are in Oregon, and we have a daughter in Cincinnati with two 5-year-olds, and they'll be going, and both parents working, and then my son on the East Coast, Wilmington, which is a lovely area, but not to my liking on the East Coast, but in Wilmington, North Carolina. It's got 3 girls, and they're all doing well, but mom works sort of part-time, so they're pretty well taken care of.
And now you live
in Glen Eden Beach, Oregon, on the Oregon coast, about 500 feet from the water's edge, and the temperature is mild, moderate year-round. One of the challenges here, fortunately, our ground floor is 80 feet above sea level, so we should be able to avoid a tsunami. Unfortunately, there are very few insurance companies that will insure the property if you live within 1,000 feet of water's edge. I was able to find a company in Minneapolis, Minnesota to insure the home and also earthquake. But other than that, it's a lovely spot.
So,
and I'm married, 3 children, 7 grandchildren. Okay.
So, what is it? The question I start these interviews with on the topic of faith is, what's your earliest memory of having faith?
I guess I remember in New Jersey one winter when I was about 5 or 6 years old, and of course Pop was going through the challenge of bankruptcy, heavy snowfall. I decided to take a shovel and go shovel sidewalks to bring in some money. And I would go down the street, and our neighbors would bend over backwards to have me shovel the snow, and they would pay me very nicely. And so the faith really was, I had faith that I knew if I went to each of the neighbors, they would let me do that, and I would get some money, and then I would bring it home and give it to Mom. So it sort of started there. Fishing. The there was a challenging time. I was, born and raised a Catholic. My father was a Catholic. My mother was a Presbyterian, but she converted with 6 children. And I remember living in Oak Hill, Florida, and one of my best friends drowned in the Indian River. And back then, us Catholics weren't allowed to go to any Protestant services or Jewish services. So here was his funeral, and I, was told I couldn't go to the service. That bothered me. And I went to the church. I stood outside by the window. I listened to this, but I never went inside. And that was the old Catholic church of bygone years, where you realize how many of church laws, no matter what denomination, what faith, are man laws. They're not God's laws. I had an experience in my career of a white light experience, and it occurred in Jackson, Tennessee one day. It was back when we were doing this technician concept, and we had one manager who didn't believe in it. He was brought in. He was the superstar. He was put on line number 1. And meanwhile, we had the other 5 lines going with the Spirit. This guy, old school, just like the utility operation. And it was really nip and tuck. And our plant manager's boss, the division manager, that was his. He was his mentor, and this guy just was doing everything possible, and you could see the difference that was going on. And meanwhile, the other lines were far more productive, quality better, safety better, and so on. So one day, I, with a couple of the other group managers, sat down with our plant manager and said, Dick has got to go. Dick is a cancer, with what we're trying to do here. And the other item is we moved into Jackson, Tennessee, which had roughly 30 to 35% blacks. Our goal was to have 30 to 35% minority in the plant, including managers, which we brought managers from around the country. And in Jackson, Tennessee, that was a real upsetting thing in the community. Anyway, I said, and I was the lead spokesperson, and I had gone to black-white sensitivity training early on during the construction of the plant. My division manager, who came from the Deep South, refused to pay and said, Lou doesn't need that. He just needs to get the job done, and so on. So I decided to, and it was a 1-week sensitivity training being held in Cincinnati. I came in, and it was 2 months out, and I said, I'm going to take vacation this week. Oh, where are you going? I said, I'm going to take sensitivity training, and I'm going to pay for it myself. Because I know I've got some issues to work through, because when I was in the construction industry in Miami, Florida, I used to go to the slave market to get some hired hands to mix the cement and tote the blocks and do certain things and dig foundations. So I've got some of that stuff I need to work through. Anyway, a few days before I was ready to go, the division manager said, you tell Lou it's not vacation. We will pay it if he feels that strong about it. So I did. And so, again, that was another major thing which I really valued, because there were some very bright black people coming off the farms in Jackson, Tennessee. Great work ethic, honest as the days is long, good, faith-loving people. And they never disappointed me. So anyway, but the white light, when we were we were able to convince the division manager that Dick had to go. And as painful as it was, sent him back to Sacramento. Make a long story short, he contacted cancer, and he died within 3 years. So it appeared that his behavior may have had some other things, but the behavior was what it was, and we had to deal with it, but we didn't understand it. But then we got faced with the whole thing of whether or not we should be in the business, and then there was some pushback, to do this and do that and get costs down and whatever. And yet again, we had exceeded all of our goals that we had set when we start the plant, and that wasn't the problem. It was the volume estimates that were given, and they weren't coming to pass. I mean, we literally shut the plant down, and I said, okay, and after 6-7 years, no one's going to be laid off. We are going to go out and coat the parking lot. We are going to paint the building. We are going to do all these things, and these are men and women. But they came off the farm, and I knew they could use their hands with some good leadership and direction. But we were faced with what's going to happen. And of course, I felt, and I'll never forget, I was in the house, and I was talking to God and just said, boy, the dream has happened. We've got a group of people, trusting, honest. We're making things happen. We've had lots of challenges, but every challenge we met. You've given us the answers and all that. And I remember looking out the window, and this white light, I mean, just like a ring, and just stopped, and I just got the message that was, stay the course. Stay the course. I'm with you. That was it. Gone. So I stayed the course, and today, it's one of the model was transferred throughout all the manufacturing sites within Procter & Gamble, the technician concept, and so on. In fact, Ed Arts, who was our vice president at the time, as we were building the plant, he came up through sales hard. He's known as Darth Vader and a very tough dude. A lot of people didn't like him. I liked him because he was honest as the day is long. Tough, but honest. And we went through, and I said, I need to talk to you about the technician concept. I need to have your agreement because this is a departure from any other thing we do in the company, anywhere in the world. And I explained the technician concept to him. And of course, we had, got all finished after about a 20-minute presentation. And I remember he looked at me and he said, Lou, I didn't understand a damn thing you said. I'm from sales. You got this manufacturing with what you do. I just have one requirement. Don't screw up. Okay, got it. And sir, if we don't do this, we will screw up, because we will now have inspectors on the line. We will have this. We will have operators and mechanics chewing on each other. Whereas a technician, we train them to operate the equipment, do their own maintenance, do their own quality checks. They were responsible for that area. So anyway,
Tell me.
So I think that white light experience was the only time it's ever happened in my life. Hey, John.
Have you ever met anybody who experienced or describes a similar experience?
Yeah, Peter Senge out of MIT. He had described one of his experiences and how he has lived his life. And actually, he developed in a seminar a white light, for people to, over about a 4-hour period of time, to try and get in touch with their inner self and so on. Not everybody can do that, and and it just happens when it happens.
What is your understanding of God today in your life?
My belief is pretty straightforward. I didn't do a damn thing to be who I am, where I am, to exist. So that's someone else. And therefore, I owe everything to God, and I use that term. It could have been a different term, but the Creator, and I have no idea what's in the future, but I'll leave it in God's hands. I'm for a ride. I'm on a ride.
Tell me about a time you doubted your faith and what happened.
Um, it's whenever the going got tough, like dealing with Dick. You know, was here's an individual that asking, and had met with him one-on-one, and it was clear he didn't believe what we were about. And it was very hard to be able to go to my boss's boss to say, your hand-picked guy, isn't going to make it here. And I did a lot of soul searching on that one before pushing the button to say, we're going to go after it. I've had times when things weren't going very well, and and it just and I realized it's of our making, it's not God's. And I turned to Him and I say, God, it's in your hands. I'm going to just sit and wait for your signals and guide me. And that's how I deal with it. I'm a very optimistic person. In fact, I am convinced that one of the reasons I am optimistic as a person is because I do have faith. And that faith is sort of like the wind. I have no idea where it starts and I have no idea where it ends. But it's there. I know it. I feel it. But I couldn't tell you what it is. I remember my humanities class freshman year in college, what is love? And also, what is God? And we studied, we would work through that. And the issue is, yep, it's here, you know it. If you're open to it. If you're not open to it, you'll miss it. But if you are open to it. But I guess in all my years, even going back as a little 5-year-old shoveling sidewalks, the journey in life, and again, I went to school in Oak Hill where we didn't have enough money. I went to school barefoot. When I was working on the fishing boat, I was barefoot. I mean, we were really poor. We were struggling, but we always, what we needed came. It was very interesting. In Cincinnati at our church, I taught junior high and senior high kids religious education. And one of the things, and being a scoutmaster and a cub master, but one of the things I always did with the kids in preparing them for confirmation class, I always took them to the second poorest county in America, which was in Jackson County in Tennessee, east up in the Appalachian Mountains. And I would take them down there, and we would go and do some projects for some people. This was coal mining country, strip mining. A lot of the young people had left, and there were a lot of old people. But I remember taking a bunch of kids, and typically the class was 12 to 16 kids. We'd go down there with the idea of putting in water or doing something, or bringing food and clothing. But we went to this one shanty that was a dirt floor, potbelly stove, one table, 2 chairs, a bed, tar paper on the outside. And we came in and we had cut down some trees to give them some firewood to get them through the winter. But they came and said, oh, come on in and get some heat. And we met and we talked with these folks probably for a half an hour, 45 minutes, and we brought some food and we brought some firewood and so on. And of course, they were up in age. I mean, they looked like they were 90, but I bet they weren't more than 50 years of age. But I remember on the way back to Cincinnati, and it was about a 2.5-hour, 3-hour trip, one of the kids said, I can't believe that people live in homes like that, dirt floors, tar paper. My father wouldn't store his lawnmower in that. And they had a smile on their face. How could they have a smile on their face living in that environment? I said, you kids have just witnessed the greatest faith that a person can have, because they know their God, as they believe it, will provide for them. You know, God sent us down there. We provided certain, and we gave them enough food and lumber and whatever to get them through for the next 6 to 8 weeks. And we also put in a water line. So now they don't have to climb the hill to a spring where the water's coming out of the side of the mountain. We went up there and created a catch basin, and we ran this PVC pipe all the way down to a 55-gallon bucket at the corner of their little shack, and it would fill up and overflow and keep going. So now they had fresh water in a 55-gallon. That was their city water system. Anyway, that same kid who asked that question is now a priest, and he's working in Detroit, but he has spent a lot of time in Palestine, in the Gaza Strip, and in Israel. He's worked both sides. Very nice guy. He's a Jesuit.
What are you most grateful for?
Oh, life, just being. I am grateful for everything that I have been blessed with, and I really come down to, you know, when I look at a tree or whatever, that's, you know, I see God in everything that's created. I mean, He's created it, but it's people, the smiles, the relations with people. I guess I'm most thankful when I see people who have, as I have, moved from one level of faith and trust and optimism and life to a higher level. You know, I enjoy seeing that. As I said, with the technician concept, when I think of my career, that was a highlight. China was a highlight. I was able to work with a lot of Chinese managers and, again, bring in the spirit of God and the creation. Even though I was working the business issue, I was also explaining, you know, my belief. And of course, I never forget the time I was, you know, singing at a Christmas party, and the staff in the lobby of the hotel around me. And when we got finished singing some hymns and some choral songs, and one young lady asked me, "What is a Jesus?" To her, and she was about 19 or 20. To her, Jesus, the name, you know, was an object, a thing. You know. So I took some time there. I can tell you all sorts of stories in China. But it was interesting. I didn't know how to speak the language, and I had to travel all over China setting up the distribution system. But when I started, I had a little card, had the hotel, my staff assistant made the arrangements. But when I arrived at the hotel, I had no idea. I couldn't read anything. But invariably, the good Lord sent someone over to me who said, can I help you in English? And they were college students trying to learn how to speak and read and write English. And they would take me to my hotel and guide me.
What's your greatest wish?
What's my greatest wish? My greatest wish would be anybody and everybody having the same vision of creation and life and optimism and a can-do attitude to make things happen for each other. Not self-centered, but outward. And it's only through doing that, you know, real joy comes. So,
Do you have a message?
A message to
People out in the world
Oh.
who see this?
I think I would say if you can dream it, it can happen. And therefore I say dream. I believe in I've all taught the concept that God, when He created us, you know, He made it very clear to the early ones, you know, you have two things to do in life. One is to believe in me, God, and honor in your neighbor. So love God, love your neighbor. Well, unfortunately, mankind couldn't handle that. We wanted a little more specificity, so He gave us the 10 Commandments. I took those 2 and I expanded it into 10. And of course, mankind kept playing the game, and of course, then He gave us Scripture, Old Testament, and then followed by the New Testaments. And here we are. But He's not going to send us anymore. I also believe a lot in intuition. I believe God is communicating all the time to each and every one of us, and all we have to do is listen. And that never came clearer to me than in China. It did in Jackson, Tennessee, when we had this big thing going on, and here's the company wrestling with, should we even stay in business? And meanwhile, we had this organizational people system that we had created that was so neat. People had freedom and they had responsibility, and it was just fun to go to work. And I can say in my 34 years of working with Procter & Gamble, there's probably 5 days that I did not look forward to going to work. 5. One hand. Maybe 4, I don't know. But all the others was joy, anticipation, and so on. So I would say just people taking the risk and listen to your intuition and trust and let the Creator, let God guide you. By the way, I'm convinced that I'm going to have a long life because I was put on this earth to do something, and I am procrastinating. So I will stay here until I get it done. So I keep procrastinating. I know what it is I'm supposed to do, but I keep putting it off.
What are you supposed to do?
That's the secret. Very honestly, I have no idea what I'm supposed to do. but anyway.
Last question.
Yeah.
When people see your picture, what do you want them to know about you?
Rags to riches story. And the riches isn't financial or whatever. It's riches in the world. I've grown to appreciate everything being God made. I can't grow a single hair on my head. I can't grow a needle on that fir tree out there. Mankind can't. We certainly can do things, but even when that happens, there's a power that's beyond us that's making it happen, and we just need to understand that. Now, I have to admit, I do have one grandson who doesn't necessarily believe there's a God, and he and I, when he had written a term paper in senior year in high school, it was due on Monday. It was Sunday, and we were at the house, and he came in around 11 o'clock, said, showed it to his mother. Mother read it. He said, she made 2 suggestions. I said, what's the topic? And he said, Big Bang Theory. And, I said, did you get to, like debating? Did you have to pick one of the evolution, Big Bang Theory, and whatever? And he said, no, that's what I believe in. I don't believe that there's a God. I think it all came together. I said, interesting. I said, there's an old story, Taylor, that someone like you met God and happened to be talking about it, and you said to God, God, I don't believe that you've created the universe. I don't believe that. I think taking some dirt, compressing it under extreme pressure, and setting it aside there, and all of a sudden some microbes will grow and bacteria and life will create, and it happens. And it didn't happen because of you. And God looked at you, Taylor, and said, get your own dirt. Okay.
Let's.
I don't know.
That was great.
Yeah. Yeah, and by the way, and the biggest growth is things that we take for granted. If you really stop, even every child. I mean, even when Ian and Nicholas, blow a cork and whatever, and you sit there and you say, but as Bobby would say, be in early childhood. But for those of us who don't have that training, it can be very challenging. But there's creation going on around us all the time. You just need to enjoy it. But China, the intuition, I really learned to stop, listen, feel it, and then act upon it. but never give up hope. Never faith, hope, and charity. Those are virtues that are just invaluable. Faith, hope, and charity. I remember Dad as we were. Pop would always, back in the 40s and the 50s, when cars would break down, tires would blow, Pop would stop and help them change a tire, give them some water for the radiator. He would have extra oil in the car and give them a quart of oil for the engine and whatever. Never asked anything in return. Just he was the AAA guy as he went. And we lived on Highway 1, US 1, so it was the main road from the north down to Miami, Florida. Many people were breaking down. Of course, you had hitchhikers, and I used to hitchhike. Don't do that anymore, but it's a sad commentary. Anyway. But anyway.
When did your father pass away?
He died while I was in China. Before I left, I knew he was struggling with some cancer. He was a heavy smoker at one time and had half of his stomach removed, but I saw him the last time we flew in from China, and said final words. And I said, Dad, you certainly have been an inspiration. But he had that can-do, positive. I mean, with the kids, he'd play checkers, he'd play horseshoe, he'd play badminton. I mean, you name it, whatever. In fact, when I came up here with Rhett and Jean, with Christian. He was go, 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 go. And so Rhett and Jean always loved for me to show up, because we'd no sooner eat dinner or I'd show up. Hey, Papa, let's go shoot some baskets, play horse. Let's go play tennis. Let's throw some baseball. Let's throw the football. Meanwhile, Rhett, was tired, but anyway, so. But it's that sort of spirit. Pop was always that way, and good laugh. Mom, she was a trooper. She had to put up a lot with Dad. I mean, like, we had the table and 6 kids, and Mom's at one end and Pop's at the other end, and okay, it's ready to serve. And he always loved baked potatoes, so Pop would take the pot and he'd throw you a potato, and you had to catch it. I mean, that's the way he served. If he could throw it, he threw it. And what he would say is, I'm teaching you some hand-eye coordination, same time. But he was a spirited guy.